Hello and welcome everyone to Smart Company, the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Doerre, and today I'm joined as always by my co-host and resident tech expert, Grace Schroeder. Today we're very excited because our guest is Diego Gaviola, who is CTO and Chief Architect of the AI solutions company, Slingr. Now, I know, Diego, you've spent your career on solving the kinds of complex enterprise scale problems most teams get stuck on. So needless to say, it's a real pleasure to have you here. So first question, because we've gone through so much change these days in the overall landscape shift. What is it about is different today in terms of building software right now in contrast to just say a couple of years ago?
Hi, Dave. Thanks for inviting me and having me today. Well, I think there are many things that have changed in the last couple of years with the introduction of AI. So in the past, building custom software was a very complicated thing. No one wanted to get into that. It was like years, failed projects, and it was kind of a mess getting into custom software. So that's the reason why most of the people were going more on the SaaS road, trying to get something that was already working and adapt it for their companies. And I mean, at that time, that was probably the right choice. But now things have changed a lot, and creating software is not as difficult as it was before. You have coding agents that are going to help you through the process. And it's not only to create the apps, it's also to maintain them. Think, when you had a custom software in the past, you had a team working on it, and then that team walked away. You ended up with a piece of software that no one knew what to do with it. So it was impossible to evolve and maintain. But now today, you can easily throw some coding agents there and understand how it works and even make changes. So if you are thinking about how custom software is today, is much more reliable in the sense that you can trust that what you are creating for your company is going to be an asset that you are going to be able to keep over time. It's not going to be something that you will need to throw away a few years later.
Right. And just full transparency, at Slingr, you had a proprietary platform that worked very well, and you walked away from it, which I know is a very interesting and gutsy thing. And you end up going to open source. What did you see coming that made it say, this is the course, this is worth the risk?
Well, it was a couple of things. So, first of all, as we were saying, AI changed everything. Our platform was more oriented to no-code developers, where you didn't have to write any code. You can click here and there and get something working. So that was great because you didn't have to get into custom code. And that was useful for developers to work quickly on a solution, but also to maintain and evolve over time. But then we figure out that with AI, the language of AI is code, and we cannot fight that. So it was going to be harder to adapt what we have than starting over. And this is, I think, some one thing that some companies are not understanding, and they are still pushing and pushing with their own old solutions that they have, instead of acknowledge that, okay, things have changed. So we are going into this new direction where we created an open source framework, and we want to make this framework like the guardrails for AI. So when you create an enterprise AI solution, you have the right infrastructure to make sure that the agents working on your app are more reliable. They create secure and compliant apps, which is very important. So this framework is not only oriented so developers can understand and use it, but is heavily targeted to coding agents. So we want to make sure that it works well for agents that need to create enterprise applications.
Yeah, and I want to dive in here because I'm the resident layman's tech expert, and I look at it from the company point of view. And I've been in business for 40 years now, and I have seen the beginning of software, PC, software as a service. And I've seen the buying patterns of, hey, I've got a business problem, let me go buy another off-the-shelf software. And it has created technical environments that are just very complicated and that cannot move. They're in a bit of cement. And everybody has been, they tried digital transformation, which is, hey, let me just integrate these silos together, and that did something. And then they add data warehouses underneath to try to get analytics across the whole, body of data that they have. But now we're in a world where there's a glide path that you can take to start to take your functions off of these older systems and create those cross-system workflows that you always wish you had. And when we looked at, the Slingr platform and whether or not there was a way to engineer it better for, the coding agents of the future, the fact of the matter is there wasn't. There wasn't a way really to adapt it and make it as fast and as adaptable as custom code. And I think many software as a service companies are going to find the same thing over time. When you have your financials invested in a certain margin that you make by selling a per seat model or something like that, you're a little bit stuck. But we didn't see a way to really grow or survive even over the next 10 years unless we took this step.
Right. And, speaking of surviving, when from the perspective of the client company, when it runs, an entire operation of software it doesn't own, what does it actually own at the end of the day is the tough question.
Well, that's a great point because you own your data. Right. Obviously, like if you migrate a system, one ERP to another, one CRM to another, you can migrate the data. But in this world where agents are, observing you, working on your workflows, your data, your documents, and they are learning, you don't take that with you if you move your data. That intelligence sits in the software as a service vendor's platform. Their AI is tuned to their platform and their needs. And this is why, we heartily believe, and we love custom solutions. We've been doing custom solutions forever on a low-code platform. We heartily believe now that it's not just a custom solution you need to own it all. And in that way, every single, mechanism, the brains of your operation stay with you through all of time, and you're not basically off, giving somebody else the benefit of that, some other vendor the benefit of that.
Right. And also, when you're using SaaS providers, you need to adapt to what they offer to you. Then probably next month they are going to say, you have to pay more because I offer this X feature that you are not even using, but you are stuck with them and you need to pay for it. So on the other side, for custom software, you can build what your customer actually needs. So what it's needed for your use cases, which is valuable for your company. So that's very important. And one thing that we have discussed with Grace as well is that by creating a custom software, today you are creating not only workflows but also agents, data, and that's your brain. So the brain of your company. So it's all the knowledge that you keep in your company that you put that in your app. So for agents, knowledge are the fuel they use in order to operate. And as you have that knowledge on your side, you keep it with you, and that is what is going to run your company. So you cannot outsource that. You cannot put that somewhere else. You need to own it.
Right. And keeping this, we have a lot of people, I'm sure, listening that maybe they're a founder, maybe they don't have a big technical background. So keeping it relatively simple. When a company builds on an open framework instead of a closed platform, what do they get that they didn't have before?
So there are a few key things that you need to keep in mind. In the past, probably you will be worried about having a database like SQL database and having a way to run processes and code. So that's still important. So I'm not going to say that you don't need that, but now there is a unstructured knowledge and information that you can make sense of it. So you need to make sure that your stack is able to process all these unstructured data that sits in your company and do something with it. And that do something with it are the agents. So you need to have a tech stack that allows you to store, process, and manage unstructured data and have agents working on it. So that's a key, the two key features that you are going to need in your tech stack today.
And I want to throw another comment in here because as we go down this road, it occurs to me that this might be a very good thing for the software industry in general. A couple of things. Number one, you could have more software companies closer to the clients versus giant behemoths that try to serve everyone. So that sort of centralized power can get diminished. And I think decentralization is our friend. From a security perspective, now you have each company, each having their own software. You're not going to have a ransom attack against an entire platform that brings an entire industry down. Yes, each individual company will have to pay their own attention to what their security methods are, but that's why you hire a company like Slingr to go manage all of that for you. But I think it's a really good thing for the software industry. I mean, as much as there are, a lot of fears about developers, losing their jobs, I think what we'll find is a whole surge of new software companies that are closer to the users that are building exactly what companies need.
Yeah, and that would definitely seem to be in this era of increasing security scrutiny, increasingly more powerful AI tools coming online, and their abilities to pierce through these securities. Having a counter process to insulate your data would be all the more important, I would imagine. One thing that kind of comes up in the whole custom software conversation is the fear of a 2-year data migration that nobody can afford. Is there a way to modernize that process without ripping everything out at once?
Yeah, that's for sure, and that's actually the recommended path that we do with our customers. So we don't want to throw away everything you have from one day to the other. Instead, we try to build things outside of what you're using and integrate with it. And over time, you can be relying more on what we are building, and we will keep growing and growing and growing until you feel confident that you have everything you need on our platform, and you can start sunsetting the other SaaS that you were using. So that's a more iterative process that we prefer because it's less risky, and usually it helps to really identify what they need, because it's very hard to get everything right at once. You want to be generating value from day one and making sure that the things that you are solving are the ones that are really important for the company. You don't want to go and create another big application with 1,000 features that then they are only 5% of them are going to be used.
Right. And it's basically, you pick a process basically to start out. Is that a fair to say? It's not as if we're asking, or you're not as if you're asking, a potential client to overhaul the entire nervous system of their company. Pick a key process and start there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. So what is the low-hanging fruit that we can work today that is going to make some impact in your company? So that's always a good place to start. So don't try to solve the most complex things from day one. Start small and get some quick gains.
Yeah, like if we look at, a PDF as just the delivery vehicle of data, you look at the email as a delivery vehicle of data, and how are you ingesting that in a way that makes it easier for users to operate their jobs? So in the old days, you were the data entry clerk for the software. Salesforce people, a lot of them, the salespeople hate it because the management wants them to enter the data, like how do we make this all easier so you're operating on the data instead of just being relegated to being a data entry clerk. And that is where it's all in the land of the possible now, that you can ingest this data, it makes its way through its life cycle in your company, and people are operating on it all along the way, and you're taking time to make, you know, decisions and judgments instead of data entry.
Right. And, you know, you always have to think, what is the source of data? Sometimes the source of it is, you know, someone saying, okay, this value and this other value, so it's already structured. So that's the nature of the data. But in many cases, as Grace was mentioning, the source of the data is an email. It might be a meeting transcript. It could be a document, a PDF document. And in the past, that was like a barrier for automation. It is not any longer. You can easily take the information from there, put it in another system, and do something with it. So that changes a lot of things about when you think how a software should work.
So, well, all right. Well, so speaking of data, you know, in terms of, you know, say dumping all your data in one place and letting AI connect the dots, what does that actually unlock for a business?
So agents are going to be as good as the information they have to make decisions. So if they do have the right information, they are going to work well. So you need to make sure that all the information the agents are going to need is available. So let's say, for example, so you want your agent to help you on creating a feature on your software. If the agent only has information about a ticket that contains a few lines, it's going to do something. But what if the agent also has access to the transcript of the meeting where you were discussing about that feature, a document, a design document about that feature, the website of the company about what they are doing and what are their goals. So it's a lot of information that the agent can take into account to not only make guesses and wrong assumptions, but actually use that information to do the right thing. So it's very important that you make sure that you keep the information in one place that is accessible to agents. That's the only way they can work well.
You know, big data had the concept of big data and things like that. It's been around for a while. How is this different than that concept of big data as an advantage than, say, 5-10 years ago?
So in the past, data lakes, data warehouses, they were still structured data. So even though you had more flexibility about what you were storing there, still you needed, like, you couldn't process a PDF, you couldn't process an email. Now you can throw everything to there. So let's say you want to put all the emails from your company there, you can put it there and then extract some information from those emails, maybe tone, of course, some structured data like sender, recipients, and things like that. But also you can extract what they were talking about, the tone, the sentiment. So things that in the past you were not able to do. So let's say you are analyzing the emails. You have a company with several projects, as we do, and you are analyzing the emails that are being sent with your customer. You can quickly see if analyzing the sentiment and see if the customer are angry, and quickly raise an alarm about a project. You know, sometimes problems don't pop up until it's too late. So you can do that analysis and get a early warning about something going wrong. So those kind of things are very important. And in the past, you couldn't process that information. You couldn't put that information in your data lake. Now you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would like to shout out to the first person that uses that technique to eliminate surveys. Post phone call surveys, post survey chat surveys, all of that, you know, should go away in favor of that sort of analysis.
Yeah, you know, the advantages are so, I mean, this is a clear evolutionary step forward. And yet, I know in both of yours works, when you talk to leaders, when you talk to founders, there's still an apprehension. What are the most common concerns that you hear in these conversations, and what's the counter argument?
Well, look, I'll start that one. And I think it's a lot of buying behavior that has been burned in over a 20-year period. And it's hard to learn new things. It's hard to, everybody has done a vendor analysis. Everybody has done a side-by-side comparison of features and choosing the best product for the challenge at hand. Not that many people have said or have been involved in custom software where it has gone well. In the past, everybody of any rank in a company has in some way touched a failed custom software project. Whether it's a whole slew of consultants rolling you into a room and writing you down a bunch of features, and then they go away, and 2 years later something comes out and it's $100 million and it doesn't really work. Or just a little like FoxPro application you had somebody build and then they left and you still have it. So not many people have had this successful experience, and that's why today I believe custom software shops are at the forefront of what's going to happen next, and that is you have to find a way to use tools at hand to create the custom, secure, scalable applications that are what the company needs, and you don't go away. You are software with a service. If for whatever reason your customer's unhappy, they can take your software to another software firm that also uses agents to divine what you have done. And it's not the old world where you're stepping into 300,000 or 400,000 lines of code that somebody else wrote with no documentation that you cannot find your way around. So all of the old problems are gone. The buying behaviors and the learning to get comfortable with that I think that's still in front of us.
Right. Go ahead, Diego.
Sorry, I was just going to add that on top of that, you might also see bad experiences from people that say, hey, I can do this with AI in 1 week, and they just vibe code something that it looks like it works very well, but then at the end of the day, to start having problems, security breaches, and they say, no, what you create with AI, it doesn't work. And that's not true. It's just a bad usage of AI. It's the same as if you have a really bad development process and you are just focusing on moving quickly, of course, you are going to deliver quickly. But then if you didn't test, you didn't pay attention to security problems, to scalability, compliance, then all that is going to be a problem in the future. So I think, that's a good analogy when we think about vibe coding and what we do at Slingr. We try to give some engineering process to vibe coding to make sure that is secure, compliant, scalable, and accurate. So it's important to mention that, because some people think that it doesn't work or what it creates is just a prototype, but you have to make sure that you are following the right processes.
And why is that? Why does vibe code, to begin with, in an uncontrolled environment, why does it create more bugs and security flaws, would you say?
So if you are hoping to get a fully functioning app with just one prompt, well, it's going to be hard, because AI is going to make assumptions. It's going to, where there is a gap, it's going to fill it. And the complex the problem, the more assumptions AI has to make, and the more risky it gets, because it's very likely that it's not going to do a good job there. So you need to make sure that you give all the information to AI to do a good job. And that's where we are stronger believers of specification-driven development with coding agents, where you need to make sure that you understand what you want to build. So define the specification, make sure that all the information is available, so when the coding agent has to work on the app, then it knows exactly what it has to create. So the outcome is what you expect, and not just something random full of assumptions from AI. And not only that, all that information that you create through the process, the specification, that's something that is going to stay in your app. So that's what is going to ensure that you can hand over that project to another team, and they are going to have all they need to plug in an agent and work and keep working on the app. So it's part of the asset. All the knowledge about the app, the specs, the implementation plans, best practices. So everything is something that is going to stay in your solution, and you can take it with you.
And I'll add something there, like from a vibe coding perspective, though, what it's super useful for is the prototype, So it's much more informative than a written document that, if somebody can vibe code something that looks very similar to what they want, and they've gone through hey, maybe it should do this, maybe it should do that, and then they hand that over, that's also a very informative step toward building an enterprise grade application. It's very tough for people to pull out of their heads of a list of things they need, but once they have their hands on something that's working, then the design becomes much more complete.
That's a great point, Grace. And actually, we do think that vibe coding is great for some specific use cases. So for prototyping is great. As Grace mentioned, if you want to share what you want to do, it's really good if you can just vibe code it and then hand it over to someone else to do it in a more engineering way. But it's a great tool for prototyping. Also, another place where vibe coding is really good is on the last mile. So if you can vibe code on top of a secure sandbox, then we see that is great. So when you create an enterprise solution, it is impossible that you are going to foresee all the usages that people are going to do with your system. So you need to make sure that you allow building small apps, like vibe coding apps, on top of your solution, so people can figure out ways to do what you didn't foresee from the beginning. So that's another very use case for vibe coding. But keep in mind that you have the right guardrails around vibe coding.
And the data. So it's kind of it's the replacement of the spreadsheet. You get the data out that you're authorized to get out, and you manipulate it the way you need to manipulate it, and so forth. But vibe coding an app for that versus a spreadsheet is just so much more far-reaching than a static spreadsheet that isn't necessarily updating because it's sitting on your desktop.
Right. For the leader who is convinced that they're ready to make a step forward, but they just don't really know where to start, what's the smallest first step that actually de-risks all of this, would you say?
I think it goes back to picking a workflow. And just by way of example, to Diego's conversation about how easy it is now to process unstructured data, you look at people that get lots and lots of invoices for things, and and we all do in our daily lives, but imagine a huge procurement department that can't tell if they're being billed properly. They don't know if there's anomalies from one month to the next. They don't know if the line items are matching up to what the contract said. And in a lot of cases, they have either sort of outsourced that to an expensive third-party firm, or they do the best they can. Internally, maybe they have some macros or some things that they've developed. And now, imagine a world where you get all of your invoices are inventoried, you have those line items inventoried, you can auto-detect anomalies, you can match those against your master services agreements to make sure that the billing is correct. And those types of workflows are a way to find lost money, and also get people's heads around what it is they're actually paying for, and if they're being fairly charged. And so, I always look for workflows that have money attached, because it's very easy to sort of pay for the investment of building custom software, and it also introduces the team to the whole process of, hey, define a problem, work with the team to create a solution, test the solution, make it better, move on to the next problem, and then you have a group of people that are now no longer afraid of AI but engaged, and they can go through as sort of that kernel of expertise and to help lead the rest of the company in further workflow migrations.
Well, that's the show. Diego, Grace, as always, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some wisdom and intellect on this conversation. It's an exciting time, needless to say, and information is our friend, to say the least. Thank you both for showing. Thank you guys so much for being on the show, and thanks for watching for everyone out there, and thank you for tuning in to Smart Company, the podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.